I want to be really careful with this next topic because I bring this up to you not because I think it's something to laugh at, but it's something to take seriously, and to think about in terms of solving the serious problems that face the country and that face humanity today. We now have a sort of combination of different studies which tell us something that many of us suspected intuitively, and it's that on average, Trump supporters aren't that smart. And I know that this is going to seem pejorative and that it is going to make many people extraordinarily defensive, and maybe it's even going to make people mad at me. But I think that it's not something to laugh at. It's just a phenomenon. You know, if the right wants to insist that intelligence differences exist, and of course, intelligence differences do exist, it's just the right likes to insist on them along certain lines, then they would have to be open to the idea that intelligence differences can exist among political stripes. And we're going to look at some of that data right now and then sort of talk about the implications. Our friend Chauncey DeVega has an interesting article, a commentary in Salon called New Research on Trump Voters. They're not the sharpest tools in the box. Trump's voters lack cognitive sophistication, often believe that the Bible is the literal word of God. And in this article, and I encourage you to read the entire thing, Chauncey writes, as the new Faith in America survey by Deseret News and Marist College highlights, the basic understanding of the role of religion in a secular democracy has become so polarized that 70% of Republicans believe that religion should influence a person's political values, whereas only 28% of Democrats and 45% of independents share that view. Okay, so that's a difference on sort of separation of church and state. Fair. But the study goes on to point out Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives also don't consume the same sources of information about news and politics. Conservatives now inhabit their own self-created media echo chamber, which functions as a type of lie-filled and toxic closed episteme and sealed off universe. The creation of such an alternate reality is an important attribute of fascism. And it then goes on to cite research by Darren Shirkett, a professor of sociology at Southern Illinois University, which demonstrates that America's democracy crisis may be even more intractable than the above evidence suggests. In his article, Cognitive Sophistication, Religion, and the Trump Vote, Shirkett examined data from 2018 and concluded there are substantial negative differences between the thinking processes and cognition of white Trump voters, as shown in the 2016 presidential election, compared to voters who supported Hillary or another candidate. Shirkett observed that Trump support has been linked to religion and level of education, but until now, not to, quote, cognitive sophistication, which was found to have a positive effect on voting, but a negative effect on choosing Trump. What that means is cognitive sophistication, as defined in this study, higher cognitive sophistication makes you more likely to vote, but less likely to vote for Trump. And the article, very interestingly, explains low levels of cognitive sophistication may lead people to embrace simple cognitive shortcuts like stereotypes and prejudices amplified by the Trump campaign. Additionally, the simple linguistic style presented by Trump may have appealed to voters with limited education and cognitive sophistication. Of course, we suspected that. Beginning with Adorno's classic study of the authoritarian personality, empirical works have linked low levels of cognitive sophistication with right-wing orientations. Last paragraph, and then we'll discuss. Trump's campaign may also have been more attractive to people with low cognitive sophistication and a preference for low-effort information processing because compared to other candidates, Trump's speeches were given at a much lower reading level. While much of Trump campaign's rhetoric and orientation may have resonated with the poorly educated and cognitively unsophisticated, these overlapping groups are less likely to register to vote or to turn out in an election. And you can read this study. The study is called Cognitive Sophistication, Religion, and the Trump Vote. It's free to read on the Wiley Online Library, and I would encourage you to look at that. So, I mean, listen, it's really tough to have this conversation because anytime you're saying a particular group isn't as smart, it is seen as pejorative, and understandably so, and it is seen as offensive in some way, and so on and so forth. We had this instinct intuitively. That there's no doubt about that. And very early on, there was data pointing in this direction. We now have some of what I would call evidence or proof, which is on average, Trump voters are less cognitively sophisticated. They are more likely to believe untruths. Look at the study. They are more likely to be literal believers of some elements from the Bible. I don't see that and laugh. Like, that's not funny to me. I want to solve problems. And one of the things that I've said many times is when we have to argue about, this is a shorthand, dumb things, we aren't arguing about or debating or working towards solving real and complicated issues. When we have 57% of the Republican Party believing that the election was literally stolen from Trump by Biden and that Trump's the rightful winner, and we have to, fend off more than 60 frivolous lawsuits in court making that case and all of this different stuff. When we're fighting that, we're not actually fixing other problems. Like, hey, we've got a disastrous gerrymandering problem in this country, as one example when it comes to voting. When we are arguing about, is there any of what we are experiencing in terms of climate change that we can link to the activities of industrialization and fossil fuel emissions, when we're arguing about that, and some percentage of the American public doesn't believe that, we aren't taking steps to actually get off of fossil fuels and live more sustainably, because we're just trying to argue about the basis of fact. So I don't see this and laugh. And I know that it's very easy to just say, oh, stupid Trump supporters. It's really a much more complicated issue. And it also relates to education. It relates to culture. There are geographical realities here. There's issue about access to education and healthcare and so many different things. So we should take it seriously. We shouldn't laugh. And again, much like the anti-vaxxers, for example, they are a danger. I mean, without a doubt, they are a serious danger. And they also are victims of disinformation to a degree. And as frustrating as we all realize it is to have to argue with people about, no, the vaccine doesn't magnetize you, and no, mRNA vaccines weren't rushed. It's based on a platform that allows their development to be faster. As much as we have to argue, it's frustrating to have to explain this stuff. They are also victims. And unless we fix the mechanism that victimized them to fall for this stuff, it's just going to keep happening again and again. One of our sponsors is Blinkist, who's been supporting the David Pakman Show longer than any other sponsor. Blinkist is the app that lets you listen to or read an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. Blinkist is the way to absorb those books you can't make time for. Blinkist takes top nonfiction titles, pulls out the book's key takeaways and insights, and gives it to you in the form of a text or audio explainer that you can consume in 15 minutes. With Blinkist, now you actually do have time to learn about all the things you've been wanting to tackle. On the Blinkist app, I just listened to This Is Your Mind on Plants by the great Michael Pollan. Super interesting, the history of caffeine and so many other things. Blinkist has you covered on podcasts too. Blinkist takes long episodes of popular podcasts and distills them into audio you can listen to in 15 minutes. With Blinkist, you can become knowledgeable about so many different things. You can have conversations with people about more topics. Blinkist makes you more well-rounded. Try Blinkist for free and get 25% off a subscription. Go to Blinkist.com/Pakman. The link is down below.